Afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. Hope you're all doing very well today, and we are here to discuss the new Eldraine spoiler, Castle Lochtwain. Will it rock? In my opinion, yes it will. Why do I think so? Well, let's find out. Okay, so Castle of Lochtwain, which henceforth I'll refer to as Castle for simplicity's sake, also because I may well be mispronouncing it, as I've been known to do from time to time, but what does it do? Well, it ETBs tapped unless you control a swamp. Okay, so I think on average, roughly half the time, this will come in tapped in a typical green-black rock deck without us accommodating it by sequencing in an otherwise suboptimal way. I think that's a fine rate for a utility land that has sufficient power to see play. And I also think that if we, maybe go out of our way a little bit to fetch more often, more, earlier than we might otherwise, if we want to ensure that we can curve out with Castle as part of that curve, we can accommodate that well over half of the time. You might also adjust your mana base a little bit just to accommodate this, but even if we don't have to, that seems like a relatively acceptable rate for a utility land. And notably, it is not legendary. It's also not a swamp itself. So, pros and cons there to considering playing multiples. I'm considering this from the perspective of playing exactly one copy, by the way, as we analyze this card. So, moving on, it adds black mana. Sweet, we like that, we need that. And it also, this is the selling point, of course, you can tap 3 mana, 1 colorless, 2 black, and Castle itself for a total of 4 to draw a card. Then you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. So no priority window between those two sentences. It's all one ability. You can't draw a trophy there, whatever, and then lose no life. Like, that's just not how it appears to read to me anyway, and not how it works. You just have to take the life loss. But look, draw a card. Draw a card stapled to a land. That is huge. That is really important. We have seen just how important that is with the absolute ubiquity of the Horizon lands out of Modern Horizons. Nurturing Peatland and Co. are seeing a ton of play in a ton of archetypes because it's just that good to be able to turn a land drop into card draw. You curve out, you use the lands to cast your spells, and then when you have the luxury of doing so, you, in the case of something like Peatland, cash it in for a draw, or in the case of something like Castle, you get your first of what could potentially be many draws off of it. So there are pros and cons. We're going to compare it to Peatland because that's the closest competitor. But first, can this fit in our deck? Alright, so what you're looking at, my friends, is my most recent green-black rock list. Obviously, this does not include Eldraine spoilers, but I'm showing it because with Eldraine spoilers in mind, specifically thinking here of Questing Beast, but also in general, I'm coming to believe that Hex Drinker, Tireless Tracker, of course Scavenging Ooze, these types of mana sink creatures are very, very well positioned for us right now in the current meta. I don't think that will change with Eldraine. I think this is something to do with the post-looting ban and SFM on-ban meta. So, I am a big believer that our mana sinks are well positioned, and I also think Questing Beast is going to be a very strong card. And despite wanting to play maybe 2 Questing Beast, I don't really want to lose Kalitas from the 75 either. So I don't want to get lost in the weeds on deck building projections, but this is all by the way of saying that I think adding the 24th land is going to be very, very good once Eldraine cards are legal. And if we look at the current land base that I've been working with, I have broken it up based on black sources and non-black producing sources, and we only have 17 black sources while on 23 total lands. To me, this is acceptable. It's an acceptable trade-off. We're basically running a treetop village that quote-unquote should be a hissing quagmire. I think that's an acceptable trade-off, but really, in an ideal world, we want 18 black sources for optimal consistency of casting Liliana of the Veil and Ashiok and Fulminator Mage on curve, right? So if we consider, again, the prospect of moving to 24 lands and making that 24th land Castle Lochtwain, well, that solves the black mana issue right then and there. Yes, it will sometimes ETB tapped, but so would other competing utility lands would either always ETB tapped, or they might be colorless in the case of a fourth field. So no matter how you slice it, that 24th land really should bring some kind of utility, and the castle is going to bring great utility while being pretty good mana fixing in context of our other 23 lands that we're already running. So definitely seems like a valid inclusion. Now, comparing it to Nurturing Peatland, well, this would do the same thing, wouldn't it? It brings lots of utility. It's got the card draw just like the castle. It always provides untapped black, and it fixes our green a little bit, so why aren't we just running the third Peatland instead of a castle? Well, there are pros and cons, and note that I'm not, selling Peatland short. My plan is to continue playing 2 Peatland alongside 1 castle, so if anything, I think Peatland is a little bit better overall. But if we compare the two, Nurturing Peatland, yes, it can produce dual mana, that's great. And yes, it has a smaller mana investment to draw a card. You're only tapping 2 mana total with Peatland to cash it in, and you're tapping 4 all day to draw off of Castle. But here is the big difference. The reason that I have always advocated being conservative with the number of Peatlands in our mana base is simply because if you start playing 3, if you start playing 4, you are going to have way too many opening hands, in my opinion, where you either have to take enough pain off of the Peatlands that you're likely to lose the game, or you're going to have to throw the hand back. You're going to have to mulligan an otherwise functional hand because maybe it has 2 Peatlands, and those are your 2 lands. What are you going to do? You're going to keep that? Not in most matchups, all right? So while the castle, if you can't manage to get a swamp down before you have to play it, it can disrupt the curve. That's not going to be that big of an issue because, number one, we can usually make the swamp, if we really want to, make the swamp drop before we have to play the castle, or we have a decent window to just deploy an ETB tapped land. And more importantly, once you have the castle down, it's just a swamp for all intents and purposes, except for Blood Moon and Field of Ruin and stuff like that. But you can tap it with impunity. You're not penalized for tapping it. You're not penalized for using your mana. And as I mentioned, I think all of our mana sinks are going to be well positioned moving forward. If that's the case, we don't want to have to decide between taking the pain off of Peatland or not using our mana efficiently. And finally, to add to that, when you do get the draw off of Peatland, you're actually stone raining yourself to do so. Now again, I'm not dissing Peatland here whatsoever, but note that with Castle Lochtwain, you get to make your draw, and then you untap again. If you do that on the end step, let's say, you've still got just as many lands as you had before. You have not actually cashed in the castle at all. In fact, you can draw over and over and over again as long as your life total permits it, and as long as you don't have any better things to do in your hand. And that's the other thing with Castle, is you're not just stuck with it. Like, if you commit to keeping a hand with an early Peatland, you are just stuck with it. You're just tapping it when you need to tap your mana. You are hoping to eventually draw enough lands where you can cash it in, but then you're setting yourself back on the lands. You almost have to see more lands off of it to keep flush with resources like we should be in the mid-game. Again, with the castle, this is more of a seamless fit along our curve most of the time, that then when both players, get hellbent, that's when the castle takes over the game. That's when the castle can even go so far as to become a mirror breaker in mid-range, super grindy matchups. So, just to review, we have a really low opportunity cost to include the castle based on the context that I've provided. Unlike Peatland, this does not increase our incidence of mulligans, unlike a third Peatland, to be more exact. Peatland is more efficient in a couple different ways, and it does produce green, but Peatland can also be, overall, I think, more of a liability earlier in the game than the castle is. With the castle, you activate it if and when you want. Yes, it's clunky, yes, it's slow, but look, if you have better things to do with your mana, you don't activate the castle most of the time, right? Or if you have reactive spells in hand that can be used at instant speed, you get to hold up your options. It's kind of like having a clue to crack. So yeah, the castle. Now, finally, in terms of just finding its place in the meta or comparing different subtypes of the BGX archetype, BG Rock very clearly can leverage the castle better than Jund better than Abzan, better than Sultai. This is also true mostly for Nurturing Peatland, but there is a notable exception that Jund, despite the fact that it needs the third color, despite the fact that it has a painful mana base, Peatland is still excellent in Jund simply because of the Wrenn and 6 synergy. You cash it in, you buy it back with Wrenn and 6, you can loop the card draw that way. With the castle, that is not an available synergy unless the opponent is actively destroying your utility lands, right? So with the castle, the only real metrics by which we can say, does our deck leverage it better than other decks, is number one, can we afford the life loss more than the 3-color decks can? Yes, we can. Number two, can we afford a utility land that only makes black? Well, we only need to find 2 colors, they need to find 3. So yes, we can. Therefore, I think it's pretty clear that BG Rock benefits more from the castle than other BGX archetypes do. So there you have it, my friends. Castle Lochtwain, I believe it will rock. I don't think it's, you see some people saying it's not good at all. You see some people saying, I don't think this is a valid card in Modern. You see other people saying, can we play 2, can we play 3? I don't think I've seen anyone say play the playset yet, but I've seen 2 and 3. I'm taking the middle ground here. I'm going to say pretty positively, yeah, I think this card will rock. I also think it's going to fit best as a one-of, but look, people are going to try 2. Maybe that will end up being better. I tend to err on the side of caution when introducing new technology. I tend to say, what is the potential downside of running too many copies? So I'm probably going to start at 1, but hey, we have a repeatable card draw on a land, card draw engine on a land that generally will not come at too great a cost, whether it be the downside of potential ETB tapped or the downside of potential life loss. We, on the rock, due to our playstyle and our 2-colored nature, can mitigate both downsides well enough to leverage the upsides. And other than that, I love the theme of this set. This card is no exception. Very cool, very intriguing art. Name is on point, even if I'm mispronouncing it. Lochtwain? Yeah, I guess that's probably right. And alongside Questing Beast, alongside maybe Murderous Rider, I look forward to jamming this when the new cards drop. So let me know what you think, my friends. As always, I look forward to your feedback. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to the patrons who make this content possible. And stay tuned to the channel because we're playing more Rock, we're talking about more spoilers, and we will continue dabbling in other black-based mid-range archetypes. I will talk to you soon. Hope everybody out there has a wonderful day.